I was born in 1958, a year after Duvalier became president.
Welcome to another fascinating episode of Window to Haiti, the journey to the heart of the people. I'm your host, David Frederick, and today I have the esteemed honor and joy to have none other than Leonie Hermantin. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, before we start, tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and how you grew up, where you're from.
Okay, Leonie Marie Hermantin, but my original name was Marie-Carmel Leonie, but at the age of 13, when I was coming to the United States, I used to come to New York before I got my green card. I realized that they were calling everybody Marie because of that baptismal name.
Okay.
So when we were doing our green card, I switched. So I did Leonie Marie Hermantin instead of my Carmel Leonie. That's why I'm not a Marie. Leonie is my grandmother, my paternal grandmother's name. So I was born in Port-au-Prince, raised in Pétionville, middle class, from a large family, in the middle of very tumultuous times in Haiti. I was born in 1958, a year after François Duvalier became president, and that ascendance to power created deep turmoil in my family.
Wow.
In addition to most of the immediate, my grandparents' children, most of them being exiled. My grandfather was killed, as was his son. And so the family went through deep, deep trauma in that my grandmother lost her husband, her son, and most of her children were exiled. In addition to that, when a new dictator comes to town, no one understands what it's all about.
Wow.
He rules with fear. So one of the things that marked, my early days was the fact that, friends are not really friends, right? Because people who were very close to my family chose not to come to the funeral.
Wow.
To my grandfather's funeral. And so my family felt extremely lonely. And the impact on me and my sister, it was just the two of us who were left in Haiti with my grandmother and my aunt. The impact was that we were very isolated because my family had been so deeply hurt by the abandonment of close friends. And the friends, understandably were scared too.
Okay.
It wasn't that they wanted to abandon, now in retrospect, because I spoke to about two very close friends of my mother. It's strange because she stopped talking to them.
Wow.
And they explained to me, very late, because I kept hearing those names.
Yes.
And so finally in my adulthood, I had the opportunity to meet them. And they explained to me that they were scared. They were young. They were terrified. And so, that's the environment in which I grew up, the fear of a dictatorship.
Now, I've heard stories about Papa Dog and Baby Dog. Now, if you don't mind, can you go a bit more in detail to probably what preceded your family?
My grandfather was involved in Clément Jumel's presidential campaign.
Okay.
Not as a high level, political, someone, presidential elections are like sports in Haiti, right? It's like who's your candidate? Even within the family, my aunt was a Duvalier, my mother, my grandfather, and one of my aunts was for Clément Jumel, my mother for somebody else. It was just like, sports. But François Duvalier kind of turned this all around because then there was fear. You know, you were Jumelis, you were this, you were that. And, you know, and the disappearances, right? Because you heard every day there were stories of people who disappeared, people who had to leave suddenly. When people left the country, there was no goodbye party. They didn't tell you in advance they were leaving because it's one day that you see them, the next day they're gone. Same thing with kids in school. One day you see them, one day they're gone. And so, and with my family, there was also an element of defiance and resistance. And so my family hid people. Sometimes when people were in the process of leaving and they were scared, or in the process of getting into an embassy, because at that time, the embassy was the shelter. It was a neutral ground. So if you entered the Canadian embassy, if you entered the French embassy, you were entering French ground. And so that protected you from harm. And so many families were in transit. So if you're sleeping here and there until you can leave the country, my house at some point in time was one of these places where they could hide. And so what that meant was that we couldn't have friends. We couldn't have friends over at our house. We couldn't talk about who was at the house. So the idea of secrets, you can't tell anybody anything. You have to, you know, that was also the environment in which I grew. But I also grew, you know, again, I was a middle-class kid. I went to a great school. I had great relationships at schools with friends. I explored, you know, literature. I had a swimming pool at my house. I enjoyed swimming. I had a library at my house. I adored reading. And so, you know, it was a lot of trauma and also a lot of the privilege of being a middle-class person that most people didn't enjoy.
Yeah. Now, tell me a bit more about your experience going to school, because you said like those were somewhat the normal aspect where you.
Yeah, it was an all-girls school. It was a nuns all-girls school. And so the juxtaposition was that I was also, you know, my grandmother was very religious. We had a chapel. Sainte Thérèse was not too far from where we lived. So my grandmother on the front side was a very devout Catholic. My father, and to a lesser extent my mother, were absolute atheists. They didn't believe. My father particularly. My mother was sort of a passive atheist. And under Duvalier, mind you, but he didn't live in Haiti. He lived in Martinique and came to visit. And so whenever he would come to visit, we would hear these tirades against the Catholic Church. And so he would tell me, go tell the nuns, go ask them about the Inquisition. Go ask them about what they did to the Jews. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to start really smart. And I think I almost got kicked out twice because I was like, sure, sir. What happened in Spain during the Inquisition? So my father really showed me that there was another way of thinking, that there was another way of looking at people, right? When my sister and I would be swimming in our swimming pool, he would pull us out of it and say, look outside. And so we would look, and he would say, look, what do you see? And I'm like, I don't see anything, because that's what, I mean, and he would say, look at these children carrying water over their heads. I was like, that's normal. I mean, that's normal. They don't have water, they go get water. And he says, that's not normal. And what's even worse is that you have so much water that you're swimming and you're pissing in. That's the kind of, so we were forced to look at the world. I mean, he was a borderline Marxist, always talked about class, always pointed out about the haves and the have-nots, about that this is the ruling class. If you think that you're one of them, you're not one of them. Like they control everything. He was the rebel. Like when we were having dinner, the maid would come to pour juice or water, and he would tell her, put the pitcher down on the table. They have hands. They can use their hands.
Wow.
So, of course, needless to say that there was always fighting between my father and my grandmother. Because my grandmother herself is the product of, she's the child of a market woman.
What does that mean?
Omashan, Omun Archahaie, a woman who was selling fruits, vegetables at the market, on the floor, with market women, the poorest of the poor, considered the poorest of the poor, but really a central element of the Haitians' informal economy, right? Because these were women who, so she could afford to send her daughter to a boarding school, not too far from where she lived, but she wanted her out of the environment so that she would meet people. She would sort of do jump, social class.
Yes.
So that's so my grandmother was also understood that she was the dream of her mother. And so for her, my father was just sort of a killjoy. It's like, wait, my mother worked really hard for me to be this patrician, respected, middle-class woman. And here you're talking about tell the maid to put the pitcher on the table. My grandmother had a little bell to call it.
She feels like she's earned it because she's worked.
It was a climb up that hill. It was, and so my mother always reminded us of that. She always reminded us that, yes, you go to school with the rich kids, you go to school, you live in Pétionville, you have a nice house, etc., but that's not where you're from. You're just like the people down the hill. So that was also, that's how my mother and my father was like very angry about this sort of class disparity, but my mother just taught us that we're just like everybody. We're no better. We're not blue blood.
Wow. So in some ways, how do you think growing up that way impact who you are today?
It has everything to do with who I am. It has, it has everything, especially both of them, and even my grandmother. Because I find an element of all of them in me. I find the elitist part in me that I always have to check. I would love to say, I'm not like that. I'm not like them. I don't think like them. But how can you say that when you're a product of that environment? And so definitely that sort of, is definitely there and pops up from time to time. And I have to check that, but at least I'm aware of it. My mother's kind-heartedness, my mother's idea that we're all, and profound belief that we're all the same, that we're not. Well, I remember one day, I always tell that story of slapping a maid at my house, and my grandmother was very angry. She told the maid to take the belt, deal with her. But my grandmother's fears was more that the maid was going to do things to harm me. So she said, take care of it as if she were your daughter. But my mother drove me down, and it was like a journey of where they came from. So she took me to her childhood home. She took me to the place where it all started, Archahaie, byen, whatever market where my grandmother came from. And then they sent us to Archahaie to again understand that that we have rural upbringing, not that it was humble or poor, but that, we're not from Pétionville.
Mm-hmm.
Pétionville is not who we are. That Pétionville is part of who we are, but our core, our roots are grounded in, Haiti's heart.
Yes. Now, and part of this series is talking about the heart of the people, and then now you were born in Pétionville, but part of your family is from Archahaie. Now,
Antigua.
And we're coming to Petit-Goâve. We're coming to Petit-Goâve, but we're stopping and we're doing a bus stop.
Okay.
In Archahaie.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about Archahaie, but also connect that to the historical aspect of what that city means.
Right. So, I come from, interestingly enough, two historic cities, right? Archahaie is the birthplace of the flag. This is where the Haitian flag was sewn. And, it's in the West Department. It's one of those stops if you're going towards the Northwest, if you're going towards Saint-Marc, Gonaïve, or Cap, you have to go to, it's one of the routes to there. So it's a stop. And this is where, when you're on the road, they used to sell tablette banane, tablette pistache, and Archahaie is also very well known for its plantains. This is where you have a lot of plantation, jardin, banane, and this is part of the trade. My great-grandmother used to bring the plantains to Port-au-Prince to sell. And so my relatives in my cousins in Archahaie, being there also gave me another dimension of what being rural was, and that it wasn't being poor. Because when you grow up in Pétionville and Port-au-Prince, you always think that en dehors, paysans are poor. And again, it was a real understanding even of the class system, and having sort of filter with my father's understanding of the world, that, my family in Archahaie was very well-to-do farmers, right? They were not poor by any stretch of the imagination. And actually, my first understanding of feminine power is to see my great aunt Idelette and Cornelia with rolls of money, because they sold food. My aunt used to go sell plantains, get on boats, used to go sell plantains in Laguna, which is across the waters from Archahaie, and then bring back poisson salé. And so and they had lots of land, and their father was a very powerful Hungan. So in the grand scheme of things, I came from a very powerful Vaudou Lacour in Archahaie, which gave my family even more of a sense of power, right? And so that's kind of, so going to the countryside, whereas in Port-au-Prince, my mother reminded us that we were not rich, we were humble, we had humble beginnings. Going to Archahaie made me feel like, we were royalty. So, instead of making us more humble,
the reverse effect.
I was like, hey. I grew up with that. Like, people can't touch you. So it was that kind of. So so this sense of being grounded in pride in who I am is really powerful. And and my mother used to take us, Le Centre d'Art in Port-au-Prince, which was like the first art center institution where Haitian artists emerged. It started in the 40s, 50s. And so I would go, my mother would take us to vernissage, like launch of people who are like major artists, right? All the folks who emerged in the 60s as the faire découpé, the naïf art, etc., etc. I used to go, I didn't know who they were, but I would go, so I was exposed to Haitian art. I was exposed to, there's this artist called Simil, who did black profile, like he painted black women in black, not brown, but black. Wow. Adorned with beautiful jewels. Wow. So I ran into him in 2000 something. He's still alive. Okay. And I told him what an impact his work had on me as a black girl. Right?
Yeah.
You know, because at that time we only had white dolls. Most of our books that we read in French were from France with white girls, white children. So the idea of black beauty was still somewhat elusive.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, with our pigmentocracy, the lighter, the this, the that, and I perceived myself as very dark skinned, which is an interesting thing, but I thought I was extremely dark skinned when I was growing up. So looking at Simil's work, equating blackness with beauty, oh my God, I can't tell you how much of an impact it had on me.
No, I can see that because, you know, first when you talk about, it's like born in Pétionville, from the social aspect of things, you know, Pétionville, that's where the other families live. And then you go to Archahaie, that give you that cultural aspect of it as well. Like, you know, in the Lakou, when you see the power of communities and your family being Uga and all those things. Now, you flip now to just like the image, because when you're looking at yourself as a dark skin and you're looking at those pictures, wow, not only
it's beautiful,
yeah, culturally speaking, socially speaking, image speaking, like I'm covered on every corner.
Exactly. And my mother didn't have to tell me black is beautiful. She took me to see black is beautiful, right? And then my mother was one of the first women who cut her hair really short. Wow. A la Miriam Makeba. It was when Miriam Makeba first came out. And of course, she shocked everybody. My father, my grandmother, the whole world. I mean, I remember she used to come and pick us up from school, and there were crowds surrounding her car, going, "Ça son fils, ça lui là, son garçon, son fils."
But also not just the cutting of the hair, but the time.
Yes.
Okay.
And going natural, not straightening her hair, believing in black. She believed in black power. We read the autobiography of Malcolm X. We read about Angela Davis, and so. But she also loved the opera. She used to take us to the opera. She loved the classical music, and so. That's and another thing that really inspired me, paradoxically, is Duvalier's oath. Every morning in school, we had to recite an oath to the Republic. Je jure devant Dieu, devant la nation, d'être le gardien intraitable et farouche. And this was an oath to the independence, the black. It was his noiriste. So he would say, "We are proud to be black. We're proud to be," and so I had to recite that every morning, and I don't know if it had the same impact that it had on me on other kids, but let me tell you, like I would look at white people like. You're not my equal. And that happened to me in school when we moved to New York, and white kids who want to make friends with me. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll allow you to be.
So it was like a favor for you.
Yes, exactly, because I am from the first Black Republic.
Wow. And we got a chance to learn about Pétionville, got a chance to learn about Archahaie. Now, what is that other city that's also part of who you are?
Petit-Goâve, which is also in the west, but more towards the south. So Archahaie takes you to the north. Petit-Goâve takes you to the south if you're going to Archahaie, if you're going to Jérémie. No, you pass Jacmel.
Oh, okay.
Jacmel, c'est après Léogane.
Okay.
Jacmel is after Léogane.
So you're studying me Haiti's geography.
Yes, so after Léogane is Jacmel, and then when you continue, you have Goâve, and then Petit-Goâve. You have to go on the Montapion, which has been, tamed a little bit. But, so you get to Petit-Goâve. Petit-Goâve is the city of Douce Macos, but it's the city of great writers, of Dany Laferrière, who is received a major French Académie Française.
Yes. Go ahead.
So Dany Laferrière has written a lot about growing up in Petit-Goâve and his love for Petit-Goâve. And then you have Faustin Soulouque, the emperor, our second emperor, Faustin Soulouque, also hails from Petit-Goâve. Wow. And so it is also a historic city because it is the hometown of our second emperor and our first winner of not winner, but someone who's been awarded with one of the highest recognitions by the French Academy.
Yeah, and the French Academy is one of the most prestigious, academy in that because, French, when you're talking about that language, it's means so much to them, and that society itself is so close-knit.
Exactly.
And for him to be accepted.
Yes, so Petit-Goâve is kind of...
Yeah. So you are from all over the place that actually has a big things. Now, tell me how has those cities, growing up in those places, have you ever heard of any Haitian project? Or either from your parents, or like anything that you've heard from Haiti?
Well, there are a few of them. I don't remember all of them now, but one of them, I know it's le Ravet a fait bal, il n'a jamais invité poule.
Which means when cockroach want to dance, they never invite
the chicken, because they know that it's their predators. Chickens will eat insects, and so they know that not to be too friendly with the chickens, and that's and so it tells you to be careful about who you trust. It tells you to enjoy life, but to be cautious, and I think that this is kind of encapsulates what my childhood has been like. The idea of not trusting people, that you don't know who the predator is going to be. You don't know who's going to try to turn you in for... There was a lot of that. People would turn other people in to gain favor from Duvalier.
And I can see that connections, right? Because it was like, not only the fear of speaking and the fear of trust, because it's also the fear like you can be friends with someone today and then that's from stories I've heard.
Right.
It's like, hey, the person is in Fort Dimanche.
Yes.
Or the person is like, you see the person today and you don't see the person tomorrow.
Or they tell them you need to give up names. You were not by yourself. You were plotting against the government. We know you weren't by yourself. You need to give up names. And they tortured people. And so, to stop the torture and to stay alive, you gave up whatever name you wanted, you could think of. I'm not going to give up my brother, but I'm going to give up my neighbor across the street who's a good friend of mine. And so there was an element of that. And so, one of the things that we have not come to terms with as a nation is who to forgive, right? And that was my work with my mother. It was like, you need to let go. My mother had nightmares until she died. And because, the arrest of my grandfather was not simply an isolated incident. They shot at my house. Apparently, they found bullets in my crib. And so the trauma was deep. And so, as I spoke to people as I said, it had a huge impact on us. And so as I spoke to my friends, estranged friends, I would come back to her. And there was one of them that we finally, her son and I, were able to have them connect via FaceTime. And so that happened like a month or two before that friend died.
Wow.
And so my mother was able to forgive her. Because, I said, you need to let go. You need to understand that, it wasn't her, it was her husband who did things. And that if you understand women at the time, she didn't have any other. So we did a lot of work on forgiveness.
Wow. And even now too, you're looking at the state of how people was, as you describe it, right, and it was just the government. And then now, for me, like a few years down the line, you're looking at that now. It's not just the government, it's also people around you that just like...
You became corrupted. Yeah. You became corrupt. There's a book, a novel by Marie Chauvet called Amour, Colère, Folie, which really goes into what happens to families, when they have to constantly negotiate with this sort of uncontrolled power, right? Because with Duvalier, there were a lot of issues taking place. There was class, there was color, there was ideology, less ideology, but so you had la police. You had the army and you had the Totomakut. And the Totomakut was an opportunity for a lot of very poor people, uneducated, to climb the ladder, the social ladder, right? With their guns and their blue uniforms, they were able to take people's lands. I mean, my family has lost like a whole lot of property that, I wouldn't even, we still have the papers, but.
It's one thing I've always wondered. Even now too, when people are leaving and like running away, that not just leaving, but they are running away for their life in a way, and leaving those their homes and their lands. I've always wondered if they still have their papers. Could there be, because I'm a forever optimist, they say, well, like at some point, someone gonna have to.
The government has to take control. And this is as long as you have elected officials who themselves are in the business of taking people's lands, you will never have something, because it's been tried after the earthquake. The Caribbean community actually came in and said, we're going to create like a land court, and we're going to compensate people. So if I bought land from you and you had given me false papers, we're going to compensate you, but we're going to give her back her land because she has the original papers. The government said they're not interested. Wow. Because they themselves...
Yes, in the stealing lands, yeah.
There is one person who ran for president who was charged with compensating. When they destroyed the land near all the buildings near the presidential palace, where my family owned property, they did some eminent domain and raised all the property. They gave one person the funds to distribute to property owners. That never happened. I would go to the office, produce all the documents, and that person is a very respectable and respected.
So I'm in the business of naming names, but
no, I'm not going to name
okay, you're not naming it. Okay, it's good.
Because There are too many innocent people.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Because if you're the child of somebody like that, you benefited, but you're the child, right? You're the child. That's why, at some level, I always felt I was split, but I always felt sorry for Jean-Claude Duvalier because people were saying he had options, but he had no options, right?
Yeah, because the system that is.
So to some, I don't feel sorry for him because he benefited, and under Jean-Claude Duvalier, there was, Jean Mapou went to prison. When Jean Mapou went to Fort Dimanche, people got killed under Jean-Claude. That's the myth, was that under Jean-Claude Duvalier, there was a change of things, but no, people went to jail, people got killed, people went to Fort Dimanche under Jean-Claude Duvalier. And so when I hear people talking about hearkening back to the days of Duvalier when it was peaceful, it may have been peaceful for some people, but there was a lot of poverty. There was still, 80% of the country was still illiterate. Fact.
Now, there are people that have gone through that period, right? What about the mistrust, the issue of community. Some would just go up and still keep that thing to themselves. And I see you in the work that you're doing. It's more like community building. Tell me, when did you decide to do that work, knowing your experience in growing up under the Duvaliers?
Again, my parents were the very weird ones. When we moved to New York, I moved to New York when I was 12. We moved to New York, to Manhattan. And we moved on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, a community that's now very wealthy, very gentrified. But at that time, it was still a very poor immigrant enclave, right? Working class, I wouldn't say poor, working class immigrant enclave. Haitians, Dominican, mostly Haitians. And so it was the cradle of the opposition to Duvalier, right? This is where because at that point, we still consider ourselves a community in exile, a community of undocumented, capacité joindre papier. And so the exile part, since the age of 15, I was going to meetings, I was going to anti-Duvalier meetings, anti-Duvalier demonstrations, where again, there was a lot of fear, because, with the Haitian consulate being in New York, we knew that there were a lot of spies. They had infiltrated the anti-Duvalier movement. So people who could go to Haiti would not get involved openly, because even those who were in exile would say they're going to hurt family members in Haiti. But my parents encouraged me to participate. I never went to bal, I never went to parties until I was a little older. But, in my teens, my work was, going to demonstration. Like my first big demonstration was Cesar Chavez's boycott grapes. I think I was 15 at the time. And so it was an environment that encouraged me and so as you begin to talk about anti-Duvalier, destroying Duvalier, you start thinking about, okay, if Duvalier goes today, what kind of a country do we want? It forces you to study Haitian history. It forces you to study the class structure. Do we want Haiti to go back to the same old thing? When has Haiti been good for its people? When have people been educated? When have people had a chance to really live in dignity? And so as you begin these conversations about this new vision for Haiti, you begin to look at your community you begin to look at how do we fight for Haiti when we're not fighting for our most vulnerable here? And so that was kind of this anti-Duvalier movement and the fight for a new Haiti and the vision of a new Haiti. What do we want Haiti to look like? You know, do we want the same old thing? Do we want a country where people have no other choice but to be maids, to be resté avec, to be sexually exploited? Or what is the new Haiti that we envision? And to do that, it's also, we're in a community where people are treated like second-class citizens. The immigration system is discriminatory. And so that was kind of the genesis of my involvement in looking at the conditions of my community here.
Now, what you talk about that new vision for Haiti? What is that new vision in your own eyes?
Well, and I have to say also that I didn't do this thinking and this visioning by myself. You know, it's nothing that you do in a solitary way. It was always with groups and with individuals that I trusted and participated with. But this new vision for me at this point is one, governance, a leadership that understands the vision and understands the role of government. Because nothing can be improved. Nothing can be improved if it doesn't start with government. You know, when we look at economic development, you can't go and start a factory in a country that doesn't have reliable energy. Many have tried to come to Haiti because attracted by the cheaper labor, to find that doing work in Haiti was more expensive because they had to create their own electricity grid, water source. So if you don't have a government that plans, that invests, even by attracting other resources, that forces its own people to pay taxes, to increase the source of revenue, that looks at education as the main strategy for development. So to me, I spend a lot of my time worrying about my own the school, this network of schools that I've devoted myself to in Haiti. And the more I work in the not-for-profit world in Haiti, the more it is clear to me that government is critically important. And not a perfect government. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But an imperfect government with a vision and the will to change the paradigm.
You've been also very passionate about passing the baton,
Yes.
And more so to keep that vision alive.
Yes.
And through that, one of the things is through the work with Sondaj, the Sondaj Fellow. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So passing the baton has been something that, has been an obsession for Gypsy Mittel, my executive director. I know that we had a community agenda meeting maybe 3 or 4, maybe a few years ago, and more than 4 years ago, because the fellowship program is going to 9th year. But one of the things that, things that came out of that agenda conference was the need to create Next, because people were concerned that some of the young leaders that were emerging didn't know anything about the community, only had the Haitian name, knew a few words of Creole, thought that culture was compas and food. And so it was really important for us to immerse this new generation of both Haitian and Haitian U.S.-born leaders to understand the culture, to understand its complexity, to understand the root causes of some issues that we all deal with, talk about it, address it, and be more mindful about these nuances when taking any leadership position. Whether it's elected office, whether it's running your own organization, whether it's sitting on a board, understanding the nuances, not feeling embarrassed. That's a big thing. Some of our kids feel, they see Haitian drama, people screaming, yelling, and so we really try to ground the fellows into understanding that people don't act a certain way because they're irrational, but that there are cultural and social roots to behavior. So, and we've been very successful. I think you're one of the fellows.
Yes,
We're really proud of you. And we have elected officials. We have prestigious board members. We don't go anywhere now with the young people. When you look at the new generation, I can't even say next generation, because you guys have claimed that space. It's not like emerging leaders, it's leaders. When we look at new leaders, definitely a great percentage of them are fellows.
Yes.
And so we're very proud of that. And so it's a legacy that I think that Gypsy and I will feel that we leave indelible marks in this community, in this country.
And that is true. It's sometimes we talk a lot about the current leaders, and many times I think the generation before would many times fail to prepare the new generations, and I think through the SkyLight Fellows, it's really just give that. At least my experience to going through it, just like not only you were taught about the successes we had coming into the community, talking about the culture, but also one of the most profound impact for me was going to Haiti, or Cap Haitians, and it actually be there on the grounds, So
unfortunately, we can't do that anymore because of the situation.
I know.
This year we went to Canada.
Wow.
And it was a very powerful experience for our fellows also, because Canada is one of the oldest community of Haitians.
Yes.
And it was interesting how the experience is different but the same. And so it was a very good experience as well. So so the fellows, we feel, is an important experience, and one that truly will have an impact.
All right. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for the stories and also how everything is coming back together, from how you grew up to you grew up, your experience in Brooklyn, New York, but also in the work you're doing with SkyLight.
Absolutely.
So always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank
Leonie.
you. And I forgot to mention that Petit-Goâve has the best Douce-Macos. The only unique treasure, national treasure, is Douce-Macos. So sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.